Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Minnesota Rackstars Podcast, and today we have with us Todd Froberg. He is from the Minnesota DNR. He is our big game program coordinator, and he kind of helps with setting the rules and regulations for our state. And I thought there'd be no better time to discuss with him some of the new rules and regulations that we have here in the state of Minnesota, along with the few controversial topics that we have here as far as crossbows, wolves, deer numbers, regulations, you name it, hunter satisfaction. I mean, we kind of go down some rabbit holes, but I'll tell you what, it's a pretty good podcast. I hope you guys listen. I hope you guys are jacked up for the hunting season like I am. It's essentially here. We're just a few days away from the opener here in Minnesota, and we're pretty jacked up. So with that, we're going to get to the podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy. Well, Todd, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me here today on the Minnesota Rackstars Podcast. And I know you're busy tonight, so we're going to kind of get things going right away. Like I said, I appreciate you joining me. Why don't you give our listeners a brief introduction of yourself and what you do for work?
Yeah, thanks for having me. First off, I'm Todd Froberg. I'm the big game program coordinator. So that's a statewide program. I'm based out of Whitewater, WMA, which is southeastern Minnesota. I guess I'm a little bit biased. I think it's the best part of Minnesota, but we are a statewide program. So, and that is essentially setting rules and regulations, species plans for moose, deer, and elk. And we actually just hired a new elk biologist, so I do even less of elk than I had previously. So, most of my job is, and we don't have a moose hunt currently, so most of my job is, 97, 98% deer. So definitely deer focused. The majority of it is focused on deer and deer related stuff. So, and I guess since we're talking about deer, the title of the podcast is Minnesota Rackstars, where I focus a lot of my time deer hunting, is in southeastern Minnesota. I hunt near Lanesboro. So, I grew up hunting and fishing down there, although I'm from northeast of the Twin Cities, but that's where I kind of got most of my start deer hunting, which was, I guess I'm pretty fortunate to have hunted down there because it's a great area. So
it is, no doubt. You always hear about southeast Minnesota, and there's actually, a few of the people in the hunting industry that have either moved to southeast Minnesota to do some hunting and, live there as well. But beautiful country down there, bluff country, and I've been through there a few times, and it's beautiful country for sure. What got you into this line of work? What fueled you and motivated you to get into this line of work?
Yeah, I guess I took sort of a roundabout way to, get to where I am professionally, and then really in school. You and I were talking about this before the podcast. I did some of my student teaching at Piers, and so I originally went to school to be a secondary education teacher. And at the time that I graduated, it was darn near impossible to get a job at that time, which is a little bit different than it sounds like now. So, but anyways, even before that, I was working, farming, construction, driving truck. I grew up in a farming and construction family. So just essentially doing that from the time I was able to farm and drive. So I have, a lot of background in that. And not that I didn't like it or still don't like the work. I still, like to be involved in it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do, I guess, for my entire profession. And I really, as a kid, wanted to be in the outdoors and just had a real obsession with hunting. It's still that way, I guess, is most of my free time or free money is spent on hunting or figuring out how I can spend it on hunting, much to probably the chagrin of my wife. So anyway, that's pretty much what drove me to that. So after I got my undergraduate, I actually went back to the University of Minnesota to pursue my master's, and I got my master's in wildlife ecology and management, actually working with avian influenza, so gull species in Minnesota. So the disease side of it, and did some CWD work. That was when that was first popping up in southeastern Minnesota at the time. So did some volunteering and got an internship with DNR. And I guess just from there, I've been there since. So doing an internship and pursuing my master's degree at the same time. And I guess I never left. So I honestly probably wanted to work more with birds just because they're a little bit less controversial. But that's not to say that I don't love deer and deer hunting. So, but I'm happy with where I am now. And this is where I am. So, yeah.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. With your position, you hear both sides, back and forth. What is, in your mind, the best part of your job?
Yeah, I think that's fairly easy to answer, to be honest. Is like, it's the best and the worst part of the job is working, or I don't want to say dealing with the public because that sheds kind of a negative light, but just interactions with the public. I mean, it can be challenging, but it can be also super rewarding. And, most of the conversations that I have, 99% of them are positive. That's not to say that we don't have disagreements or that the DNR is doing everything right, but that's the best part of the job is you get to hear a diverse, you get diverse interactions, hear diverse perspectives. And even when you disagree with people on things, that you're all kind of focused on the same sort of goal, even if you have different ways to get there, as a healthy deer population. So I think that, that is definitely a positive, and just essentially, doing what I wanted to do or what I set out to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, deer in the state of Minnesota is a highly talked about subject and a deeply cared about subject. I mean, you look at the state of Minnesota and how many people are out there hunting and whatnot. It's because people care about the resource, like yourself. The reason why you're in your line of work is because you care about the resource. If you didn't care about the resource, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So it's just I think in the end people really care about it, but obviously somebody's got to make some decisions in the end, and like you said, sometimes they're not right, but it's about adjusting and whatnot and trying to do what's best for the population. As far as regulations go, let's look to this year right now. What are some maybe new regulations that people need to be aware of going into the 2024 season?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest shift, biggest regulation change for 2024 is related to our carcass movement restrictions. So some of this is probably already taking place. I guess some out-of-state hunters maybe have been on some mule deer or elk trips, or even maybe some early velvet whitetail hunts. But hunters that are hunting out of state are able to take a portion, I guess, of the head and the neck, so with or without the cape, into the state, as long as they're delivering it to a taxidermist within 48 hours, a licensed taxidermist. And then on the back end of that, the taxidermist is required to show proof of receipt to a line landfill. So we're trying to, I guess, kind of create a win-win for both taxidermists in the state of Minnesota by not totally restricting, business, especially for those people that are on the edge of kind of the border areas, and then also maybe just the ones that have traditionally had a lot of out of state heads come in. So that's a big one, but we also get a little, I guess on our end, a little mitigation of risk that we know that it's being handled in a correct manner, following best management practices and going to a line landfill, which is, for most people, or where their household waste is going. So those are managed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And then I guess similar to that, those hunters that are hunting within a CWD management zone are also able to take heads out of a CWD management zone to a licensed taxidermist as long as it's going to a licensed taxidermist within 48 hours of leaving the CWD management zone. So that's a pretty big change for people. Previously there was a blanket restriction that you could not bring anything in. So, and for some taxidermists, it was really, harmful to their business if they're on the edge of a CWD area, restricted of what DPAs they could accept deer from, or like I mentioned, a lot of the border taxidermists had expressed that it makes up a large percentage of their business, from deer or elk, moose coming from other states or provinces.
So was there anything that we learned? I mean, when we had that blanket on everything, you can't bring it in. Was there any findings or anything like that as far as CWD goes that helped loosen those regulations a little bit?
Well, sorry, I dropped off there for a second.
Oh, you're good.
I don't know if there was anything, direct, new kind of evidence or scientific management of any sort. Just really having conversations with Minnesota Taxidermist Guild and taxidermists in general, how it was affecting them, how it was affecting other hunters. We did, I guess, sort of realize that there's also some unlicensed taxidermists operating within the state. So trying to bring, more people up to be licensed so that we have a better control of where these heads are going. And some of that's due to just kind of hunting practice or cultures, more people have been doing European mounts than maybe in the past, or what I guess traditionally had been happening, where they're just, I guess, taking a skull plate and posting it on a plaque or something, so just more trophy preservation in that sense, that that was maybe happening and not being very regulated. So this kind of gives us a little bit more oversight of kind of mitigating some of that risk. And then also I would just say maybe it was just sort of an overburden in the sense that if we can correctly mitigate and maintain that risk and make sure that that management or those heads where the prion accumulation is, so any of those sensitive parts are being disposed of properly. And that, I guess, from that's the scientific management perspective, that is those clay line landfills are I guess have been proven to contain CWD prions, or the prions bind to the clay soil. So I can't ever say that it mitigates all risk or there's no negatives associated with that, but done properly, it's following best management practices. So
Sure. Yeah, I didn't even think about the hit that taxidermists were going to take in that situation there, but obviously, I mean, coming from your guys' standpoint, I mean, your number one priority is the deer herd, the health of the deer herd, and totally understandable where you're coming from there. And to be honest with you, it was kind of a benefit for me because I found a really good taxidermist in South Dakota that does a really good job. So, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have brought it to him. And now all of a sudden I have a really good taxidermist that does a lot of my mounts for me. So there's a benefit there for me, no doubt.
And one more thing to add, I guess, this to the credit of taxidermists, they said several times, several different taxidermists said, we had hunters who were bringing us heads from out of state that were not supposed to be, but they were turning them away. And then, so where do they go after that? I don't know. So in those cases, we're mitigating that risk, I guess, potential risk. So cutting some of that off. So they're just as invested as deer hunters are. So.
Yeah, no doubt. There was a change with the feeding ban this year as well, wasn't there?
Yeah, so that added the addition. So the feeding and attractant ban added the addition of Aiken County. So that was the only change. So
okay, yeah, no, because this year we were able to feed. We had a feeding ban on, then that was lifted. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's there can't be anything in that area as far as food goes 10 days prior to hunting. Is that what it is?
I believe it's 14 days.
14?
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Well, better safe than sorry. Anyways, don't listen to me.
Yeah. I believe it's 14 days. And
Okay.
so, and maybe you've, I guess, experienced the feeding and tracking bans. I guess if you're in Morrison County, maybe that did shut off at some point. The last few years, we've kind of changed the way that we've applied our feeding and attractant bans, just to not be shifting across, I guess, on the landscape. Where we first had detected CWD in southeastern Minnesota, the counties are a bit smaller than, I guess, if you go to the far north where we got Cass County or Lake County or some of those giant counties that would encompass 10 counties in southeastern Minnesota, where we were previously doing it as just like a blanket. It pulls the whole county in and all surrounding counties. So it's a pretty huge area for maybe one positive deer on the very south side of a county, which would ultimately affect a huge area. And it doesn't just affect obviously deer hunters in that sense. Recreational wildlife watchers or people who recreational feed for other critters as well. So there's a kind of a bigger effect. So we kind of wanted to not, I guess, affect people as much, but still keep the integrity of, I guess, mitigating risk in that sense. So those, I guess, in general, that feeding and attractant ban has changed a little bit over the last few years, but the main change, I guess, this year was just the addition of Aiken County to that. So.
Sure. What other regulations have changed, or maybe some key ones that maybe you want to point out going into this year?
Yeah, I mean, I guess thankfully that there really hasn't been anything major. Just the importation ban has changed, and then as we talked about, just the addition of Aiken County for the feeding and attractant ban, and then the only other change really is, at least related to deer hunting, is the blaze orange on a synthetic ground blind on public land during deer season. So that was last year. It came through last year, but there was some unintended language associated with it that actually was pretty broad and was really applicable to all hunting on public land, which was not our intention. It was supposed to be from a safety aspect related to deer season. So now it's deer season, but that does include all deer season, not just the firearm deer season. So that's, I guess, the other change that would affect public land deer hunters for sure.
Yeah, talk a little bit about, like, I don't think people understand like how intense it is when writing a regulation, like how specific you need to be to avoid situations like that.
Yeah. So I guess, and that's a good example. In that instance, we submit. So our we usually have some policy language that the DNR submits to the legislature, and what we submit doesn't necessarily always go through. There's some give and take from both the House and in the Senate, and then obviously whoever is the representative or senator that they have constituents that they're answering to. So there's maybe conflicting views on some of those. So there's also give and take there. And like in that specific instance, what we proposed did not actually go through. There was some adjustments to the language that we proposed, and it didn't end up the way we wanted. So we resubmitted again this year and fixed just some clarification stuff. So that stuff is just minor, but in some of those instances where I guess another example would be our elk language this year. So from the DNR technical bill, we were trying to decouple some agricultural payments to the elk population, just to try to, I guess, create some, having worries about a small elk population with some a little bit of genetic bottleneck or genetic variability. So some of the issues related to that and just the elk population in general. But anyway, trying to decouple those from the ag payments from growing the elk herd. And it didn't go exactly, I guess, to the language that the DNR specified. There was some, give and take throughout the whole legislative session to where we ended up this year. And the language did change, but like I say, it wasn't exactly what we submitted. So,
yeah, it's there's a lot of work that goes into it, and a lot of different people that are involved with it as well. And yeah, I didn't realize that, all of a sudden you just get this printout and it's like, well, what are they doing here? You just read it and go along with it. And then there's so many, ways to read things and interpret things or whatever. You got to be really specific on what it is. Otherwise, all of a sudden there's a situation that you didn't intend, to happen. And all of a sudden there it's, something you missed. But yeah, a lot of people got to check it. A lot of people got to go through it. It's really interesting to me, all this stuff and all the people that are involved with it as well. As far as when somebody harvests the deer, obviously technology has evolved. You're able to register deer online now. How has that gone? I mean, has that been a success?
Yeah, it doesn't seem. So we did a little bit of, kind of testing on that, and that was just related in a small area, kind of a control group of the ability to only register online, and we had pretty good success. But that was really the only way that we could test that. But I would say in general, it doesn't really seem like there was a big shift in registration or, kind of harvest from that. So it made it, quite a bit easier for people to register deer. You can call in or you can register online. Then you also obviously have the option to go to electronic licensing station and, register your deer in person. Of course, there's no in-person check station requirements anymore, but just, in general, if you want to, take it to the gas station and register, you certainly still can. So, but there are other ways. Obviously, the online or the phone system is pretty darn easy.
I do a fair amount of hunting out of state, and each year I get a email asking hunter satisfaction survey.
Yep.
I'm trying to think, does Minnesota have one of those as well?
Well, so it related to, I guess, deer modeling, or like, how I suppose our bag limits are set. Like we have mandatory harvest registration, which not all states have. Like a lot of the southern states don't have mandatory harvest registration, or some western states don't have that. And for those, they utilize some of those hunter surveys of, to get an estimate on what harvest is. So there, I guess from that stance, there's a little bit of different way to get an estimation on what harvest is if you don't have mandatory registration. But we do hunter surveys, postseason hunter surveys for hunter satisfaction and those types of things. And we're actually discussing those now to try to do them more frequently and to get more consistent responses on an annual basis, which will be very helpful, for public input and then just overall deer management in general. So,
yeah, that's one thing I was looking up actually today. You see all this stuff on social media and on TV and stuff, and I think there's a lot of people that would agree that Iowa's kind of, the main state that a lot of people look at for, big buck and whatnot, big bucks and mature deer and whatnot. And I was just looking at their hunter satisfaction surveys that they did, and one of the questions was the quality of deer hunting in Iowa. It showed 74% of people were satisfied. Overall deer hunting experience, 80% were satisfied. The quality of bucks harvested, 42% were satisfied. The quality of bucks that they saw, 46% were satisfied. Overall number of deer they harvested, 65% were satisfied. And then the number of deer that they saw, 66% were satisfied. Now, when coming up with rules and regulations, in my mind, I think that's a pretty good number of people that are satisfied. And obviously you're not going to satisfy everybody, but when coming up with rules and regulations for the state here, Is there ever any communication with other people in other states, or kind of looking at what other states are doing to try to mimic that, or what all goes into that? I mean, is there that goes on?
Yeah, certainly. I guess from just the perspective of kind of observing some other states, we are, I guess I hunt in several other states. So I like to think that I at least have a diverse perspective of how kind of other states are handling things, and just, what the hunting quality or hunting experiences in other states. So I think, for me, that's helpful in my job. And then I guess from a professional perspective, we have been having an annual meeting with the Wisconsin deer program, and some of the Wisconsin deer biologist researchers, and actually had Michigan just recently as well. So we communicate with them. We were talking about which now I'm kind of blanking on the issue which we were talking about. It was related to a multiple buck issue. We have the 3 buck limit in southeastern Minnesota and some of those DPAs, and some other states have had longer multiple buck limits. So we were kind of looking at what the percentage of hunters taking multiple bucks, or people taking multiple deer for some of our areas that are over goal population. So just trying to tease some of that stuff out, what works, what doesn't. But anyway, that conversation happened with Tennessee. So we do have conversations with several other states, and actually just coming up here in 2 weeks, we're actually going to Michigan for the Midwest Deer and Turkey workshop. So that's a assembly of all the Midwest states, and that includes Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan, South Dakota, North Dakota, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, Nebraska. So all their deer, and then actually their turkey biologists. So all of us in the same spot for a workshop. So that's an annual workshop. That is definitely one of the highlights of the year, because it's just interesting to see some of the same struggles that the states are having, and then just successes where that I guess they're having, or some of those regulation changes. So I think there's definitely some things that we could be doing, or emulating some of those other states to just make some changes, or in certain areas, maybe harvest more deer, kind of balance the ratio, the buck to doe ratio, and those types of things. So we are trying to learn from some other states. And then I can also say that within state government, things move pretty slowly. So I'm not going to say that you're going to see anything here in the next year, but
Right.
Yeah, we definitely are having these conversations and trying to make some positive changes, I suppose. So
Definitely. What is one thing, like personally, just you as a hunter, do you like what another state might be doing that, it'd be cool if Minnesota could implement this?
Yeah, there's this is a tough question to answer, and this is one that I always get a lot of criticism on, or even like from some of my hunting buddies, or they're always like, well, why don't you just do this? North Dakota does this, and it's like, well, yeah, North Dakota also has a deer hunting population of 60,000, so it's like, it's not always apples to apples. And I'm not trying to make excuses. I think there's things that I would like to do differently, but like you mentioned Iowa, there's certainly great deer hunting in Iowa, but they get, I talked to the Iowa deer biologists, and they get some of the same complaints that we get, and then also like some, I talked to the Wisconsin biologists, and they get some of the same complaints we get, and then people are like, well, why don't we just move the season back like Wisconsin does? And Wisconsin some of their deer hunters want to move the season up, or vice versa. So it's interesting. But there are things, like in general, I guess if I was the ruler of the world and got to change deer regulations in a single way, I wouldn't, I guess I would maybe not like a single statewide opener, to just be a little bit more flexible of when that happens, based on north and south. Like we have a hugely diverse state, diverse ecosystems, timing of the season, not necessarily like timing of the rut, but just temperature in general. is different of what people's comfort levels are. So we're a big state, so I think we could. It would be nice to not be so rigid on some of those things, and it would, in some cases, improve our deer herd and deer health, at least in me as a hunter, and then even somewhat professionally, in my opinion. So I think would have an opportunity to impact the deer herd in several ways. So.
It's a good point, and that's actually one of the questions I thought of today. You think about the 100 series, up north, and I pulled some numbers, and I was looking at hunter numbers in the state of Minnesota, and they're on the decline. They're on the decline, and I looked at the zone 200s and 300s and whatnot, and to me it looked like the 200s were pretty similar from I looked from 2021 to 2023, and zone 200 and 300, they were pretty similar for hunter numbers throughout 2021 to 2023. Now, the 100 series up north, 2021 there was over 150,000 firearms. I'm just going firearms here, okay? There was over 150,000 hunters in 2021. 2022, that number dropped to 144 plus thousand. And then 2023, it dropped even more to 127 plus thousand firearm hunters up there. And I know a bunch of people that have hunted up there for many years. And obviously there's an issue there, and the deer numbers aren't there is what I'm hearing. I don't hunt up there. This is just what I'm hearing from people. So what are we doing to try to get those numbers back up? In my mind, kind of up there, because to me it looks like central to southern Minnesota, those numbers are staying pretty even, but it's that 100 series up north that's really dropping off based on the statistics.
Yeah, some of those are definitely accelerated more than others, and it's hard to conclude anything else besides just hunter satisfaction and or deer numbers. It's tough to continually go back to an area if you're not seeing deer. There's just plain old. You can't say it any simpler. It's just that's why people aren't hunting. So.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't have an excuse for that. There is no, excuse for that. There's just nothing else I guess I can say related to that. This is why. It is a bit different style of hunting as well. Like the traditional deer camps of where people are going up for a week at a time and not coming out. So that's just not as popular anymore. That's being observed in some other states that have kind of those northern, like the northern latitude or that type of hunting. Similar in Wisconsin, similar in Michigan, and they've had bigger drop offs than us. And so they're experiencing some of the same decline in deer numbers as we are in some of the the northern part of the state and some of the areas that are experiencing more winter, and then of course a different predator base or a more robust predator base in some instances in some areas. So I guess I'm sort of rambling now, but the where we're going to go or, how we're going to achieve, I guess, some of those numbers or, an increase in hunters is, the simple fact of it is there's just going to have to be more deer to entice people to want to hunt there. You can only, I guess, put the carrot out there so much that this is a wilderness hunt. It's kind of a different way of hunting, that only appeals to so many people. So, but I think in general that there's, some different issues and that maybe just, aren't as easily solvable. We've had some habitat or forest composition changes, market, driven by the market. There's just not the same Some of these timber sales are being transported farther, and just the age of harvest has changed from what it was in the past, and so there's just some potential. We are planning to do some more research related stuff up there, kind of looking at forest composition and just overwintering habitat, and then just to have some more cause specific mortality related stuff. We have some in some localized areas, but the predator populations are pretty dynamic. Some bear populations have changed pretty drastically in some of those areas, whether that's more or less, but they are changing. These things aren't static. We have more bobcats than we previously did. In all indications, everybody likes to, take the scapegoat and point at wolves. I'm not going to say that wolves aren't a problem or that they aren't eating deer, because then I would be lying, and obviously they are eating deer. Especially at a specific time of year. And we also can't, deny the fact that we just came off of, 2 extremely difficult winters. And we've observed this in the past. In fact, I was just talking about this today, that in, like 97, 98, and then in 2012, 13, we had nearly the exact same harvest numbers. All indications is we have less hunters of now. So some of those better measures might be like hunter success, and I'm not saying that that's perfect, but anyway, I guess a long way of saying that there's a lot of complicated factors. It's not just one thing, but we are trying to we're continuing to do habitat management work. There's a lot of habitat management work happening in a lot of those areas. It's not going to happen overnight. We've had a really snowy decade as well. So Mother Nature is going to have to hopefully play her part in this as well, and build some of those populations up. But unfortunately, it's not just going to be one thing, and it switches to fantastic deer hunting again. So it's probably going to be a longer played out process. So, but I guess from at least now. Habitat management work, increasing deer, habitat to provide more winter browse and forage, some of the younger successional forest at crucial times of the year, and then also having that diverse species timber stands to accommodate winter habitat as well, and then I mentioned wolves. Wolves are currently on the are federally protected. They're on the ESA. So I know a lot of people would like to see a wolf season or have strong opinions about wolves, but really I guess from a deer management perspective at the moment, there's not really a whole lot I can say or do with wolves or to ease that concern.
So you talked about, you're down in the southeast, and I believe there was some APR that happened down there, right? Okay. So based off your experience with APR, is APR something that could be implemented up in those northern counties zones to help with that deer herd, or what have you learned through APR? Would it be able to help them up there?
Potentially. So currently, actually, it's in statute right now that we have to have legislative approval to, I guess, have APR out anywhere outside of those 300 series DPAs. So anywhere outside of southeastern Minnesota wouldn't be a rule change; it would be a statute change. So that makes things a little bit more difficult. I guess just from a practical standpoint of if we are, if that would, I guess, be to the betterment of hunters. Yes and no. I guess, obviously our most important cohort of the population up there, or what's driving those populations, are obviously going to be our breeding females. Just putting more fawns on the ground. So, even typically there's not a huge, in some of those DPAs that are bucks only, the harvest is so low, that's not really affecting the population or changing the population much. So, I don't know that it would, you'd see immediate effects at least from a population standpoint with an APR there, just because I think the ultimate factor is just breeding females. So
Sure. Yeah, I know my father-in-law hunts up in that neck of the woods, and every year he goes up there, and he's usually pretty successful bringing home a buck, but every year it's like that one deer, one buck, that's it, just one buck, and it's like, okay, it's been that way for how many years? It's like, is there any other type of adjustment it can do to get that population, thriving again, where maybe you can take a doe? He applies for a doe permit, but very seldom gets one. But is there any other types of changes that can happen to help increase that population? That's why I brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, or just a good question. It's this is also, I guess, a good point of pointing out that deer management in general is a little bit of a it's a difficult thing. Things don't, like I say, things don't just turn around quickly. It's I guess you kind of equate it to steering a ship versus steering a canoe. And really, ultimately, we're not trying to make drastic changes in a year. You're trying to make those changes on a slow basis. But in those areas where we haven't been able to recover those populations in over, some cases a decade or 15 years, some of that's probably the result of, those early 2000s that I guess there a multitude of factors. Anything in nature, just environmental is not specific to one cause. And in this case, I think that there was probably some overharvest of deer. Maybe some of the managers were a little bit too liberal with some of the tags given out. There was a little bit of a fear that, we would kind of stay at those levels of whatever, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, those years when deer populations across the Midwest were just astronomically high. There was a little bit of a fear and maybe just a too aggressive and maybe shot too many deer from that. And then on top of that, strung together some, severe winters, which really knocked the population down. And then, in general, as we kind of talked about, those predator bases have shifted, like I say, they're just not static, and I don't doubt that there's people, I guess, from a statewide perspective, the way, and not to go too deep into the wolf conversation, but our survey methods haven't changed since they're whatever. I'm not the wolf biologist, so don't I guess pick me apart on this, but they've been pretty steady for a while, and that's not to say that there's not differences locally. I guarantee that there's probably places where wolves are having a greater impact in certain areas, so that's just the way it is, but on a local basis. But
well, I think the other thing too, I mean, a lot of people, want to point the finger at wolves, but, the bear, I believe, are the number one predator of white-tailed deer.
Yeah, especially, like that's an interesting thing too, is, I was at Game Fair and had several conversations about wolves, and just in general, they get the finger pointed at them, which is, fair for late winter.
No doubt.
But in the spring, and that's been demonstrated in several different research studies that bear and bobcat are having a more of an impact in other times seasonally. So seasonal predation is a pretty interesting thing. So
do you know what the regulations are up in that 100 series as far as bear permits go? Is that over the counter, or like do you know what that is?
I think most of those are in lottery. So
Okay.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because I just I've been up there. A lot of bear up there too.
Yeah.
Um, we're going to transition here. I'm not going to keep you too much longer because I know you got obligations tonight. We're going to switch from one hot topic to another one. Okay. This last year, the hot topic in the deer world was crossbows.
Oh yeah.
Um, what are some of the things that we saw from crossbows this last year as far as harvest goes and all that stuff? And maybe I should have prepped you for this one, but it's another one I thought of here not too long ago. But what are some things that we've seen from crossbows this year or this past year?
Yeah, and that's a good one to talk about with, like, how regulations are made or how regulations come about. That came from the legislature. We didn't have any conversations about that, and I'll be honest, I didn't know that was um, coming down the pipe at all until like I think it was a week or 2 weeks before the legislative session ended last year. So. But anyways, we are required to submit a report after 2 deer hunting seasons, on the impact that crossbows have to deer population, and then we'll also be assessing, like hunter satisfaction or the impacts to hunters as well. So we'll be doing a postseason survey that's coming after this coming season of archery hunters, and just trying to get at some of those things of some of the, I guess, recruitment of archery hunters, hunter satisfaction and harvest, and then just like first time archery hunters, first time crossbow users, those types of things, to try to tease some of those things out. But in general, from a harvest standpoint, looking at last year, so it was I guess and I can share these with you too, that I have just a couple different highlight sort of tables, figures, and I guess kind of one interesting thing, which isn't really super unexpected, but the proportion of harvest by crossbows increased as the season went on. So there was more harvest by proportionally with crossbows in December. We've also observed that in in the other states that have made these changes, Missouri, Wisconsin, some of the other Midwestern states, that they've seen the increase in proportion of harvest changing, more crossbow as people are gearing up. So 1, 2, 3 seasons. So that changed. The one thing, I guess, and what I say is, it's not super surprising based on, I guess, what we've observed from other states. But then I also think, just from a practical standpoint of people being able to, maybe caught some people off guard. They didn't even know about it until the season started. So people buying crossbows or saving up money to buy crossbows. Gear isn't, inexpensive. And then just ultimately, it's harder to kill deer in December for sure, when they're wary. They've been shot at from the firearm season. There's maybe some, although we didn't have much snow on the ground, but snow on the ground, they're able to see a little bit better. So it's harder to kill. And also you have kill a deer, and also you have more clothing on. So it's harder to pull a compound bow back. So a little bit easier to use a crossbow. But ultimately, harvest was very similar to the previous year. We didn't have a huge jump. We had a 6% increase in license sales, with the biggest majority of that coming from youth license holders. So that was, I think it was like a 42% overall for youth license holders, archery holders. So that's a pretty big jump there. Really, I don't know what we can kind of attribute that to, other than crossbows. It seems pretty clear. And then I guess from a harvest perspective, one of the first, I guess, kind of figures I looked at was just the age and sex of deer by year, so 2022 to 2023, and there was an increase of I guess adult males harvested, it wasn't a huge jump, but it was like 5% or something. So I guess your immediate thought is like, oh, well, maybe that's because of crossbows or something. But then when you look at the weapon type breakdown at Harvest for 2023, it is I think it's off 1% on one age and sex cohort, but it's identical for vertical and crossbow. So I don't necessarily think that we can conclude that it shifted anything or there was anything targeting based on what type of weapon archers were using. And I guess the other thing that we've observed, or what we've noticed from other state changes, overall harvest has not changed much. There's maybe some shifting of when deer are being harvested to earlier in the year, strictly related to probably more people out in the woods, which I guess crossbows can allow. And then the probably a slight increase or an increase in archery harvest, but overall harvest isn't going to increase just because crossbows are in the woods, so.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's people that'll say that, you hear this, that crossbow should have its own separate season. It shouldn't go for the entirety of the archery season. Do you see crossbows just staying where they're at throughout the entire archery season, or do you see a shift maybe later in the future saying, you know what, maybe crossbows are in a different league because, kind of like you alluded to, it's a lot easier when it's December and you're bundled up tight. I've seen it, and I've heard people say, I couldn't pull my bow back because I had too much clothes on, where if you got a crossbow, you just pull it up, pull the trigger. I saw a video the other day. I would say a probably 6-year-old kid shot a really nice buck at about 40 yards with his crossbow. Do you see there being a change in that and having a separate season, or do you think it's probably going to stay the same?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'll just be brutally honest. I don't think that there'll be a change. I don't think, and I mean, it'll be really hard to demonstrate that there's a major impact, especially to deer populations, based on crossbow use within 2 years. I just don't think that that's a a realistic time frame to demonstrate that they're having a negative impact on deer populations. It'll be interesting to see kind of what we observed from the hunter survey. So we did, we have an annual deer after season deer questionnaire, and it was that anybody can take. That's a self-selected survey. So we do that after every deer season. In one of the, we usually have, if there's a specific theme that we're trying to get some more information on, we have those questions in there, and we had a couple of crossbow questions related to that. And the response on that was actually fairly neutral. I think it was, there was it was a little bit higher that, of those, I guess, archery hunters that disagreed with crossbow use. But I guess I was maybe sort of surprised that it was just a pretty neutral issue in general. So it'll be interesting to see, I guess, where we come out with this hunter survey. And it would, in my opinion, would really have to be a drastic impact to hunter satisfaction and or just a major disagreement to take it away. I think once opportunity is given, it's really hard to take it away. And especially since, like I said, just the process of how it came out. It wasn't, a DNR initiative. It came out of the legislature. So I guess I don't think that it will go away. So
yeah, no, that's it's all this stuff has been really, really good information, and I appreciate you speaking with me today and going through all this, because I know your position is a difficult position to be in, and you get your finger pointed at you a lot, and people don't always disagree or agree with you. And I just want to thank you for everything that you do, because somebody has to do it, and I know you got the right mindset moving forward just by speaking with you and speaking with you beforehand. We truly do appreciate all the effort that you do, and I just want to thank you for doing that before we close down here. But anything you kind of want to hit on and make sure people know or are reminded of before going into the season here, because the archery season opens this weekend, and things will be kicking off. So just any reminders or something you want to hit on before we close it down?
No, I guess just a general reminder, obviously, check out the regulations book before you hit the woods, just to make sure that you kind of know what's going on. We covered kind of the main things, but just in general, what your deer, deer permit area limits are and those types of things. It is important to just kind of check those. Give it a quick once over and brief look on that. And I really do want to, highlight, we are public servants, so we're here to answer questions. Like you said at the kind of the outset, that maybe we don't always agree on everything, but I'm here to answer questions, or I guess explain the reasoning of why things are. So I'm always here for questions and input. As long as we can have a respectful conversation. It's always helpful, and sometimes I think people say I hear that the DNR doesn't listen, but we do, and that is a major process for how our annual bag limits are set as public input. So I want to put it on the deer hunters that it is very important to provide your input and be involved in the process, even if it sometimes doesn't feel like you're being heard. And if you don't get your way, that doesn't mean you're not being heard. But I can assure you that we are hearing, and we're picking out these common themes of changes or processes. So I just want to put in that plug. Feel free to provide input and reach out. It's an important part of deer hunting and deer management. So
awesome. Well, Todd, once again, I appreciate everything that you do for the state, and then also thank you for joining me tonight here.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
Well, thanks for tuning in this week, you guys. I truly do appreciate everyone out there who tunes into our podcast, and also appreciate all of my guests, especially this week, Todd Froberg from the Minnesota DNR. I really appreciate when people from the state are willing to come on our podcast and have good discussions with me. I really do appreciate that. Also, special shout out goes out to our sponsors. I know one of our sponsors, Arctic Shield, has a sale going on right now. So if you're looking for some hunting apparel, I'm struggling. If you're looking for some hunting apparel, check out Arctic Shield. I know they got some good deals going on. And so we got Arctic Shield, Domain Outdoor, J&R Outdoors, Skullcraft Fish Guide, TechCam, and also Fourth Arrow Camera Arms. Like I said, I appreciate everyone listening. Don't be afraid to share our podcast with other people too. If you know they like hunting, I'm sure they'll enjoy listening to the podcast as well. So with that, make sure you also follow all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok we're on now, and also YouTube. So get on there, check some things out, and hunting's here, people. Hunting is here. We're excited. Good luck to you guys, and this will be the last podcast going into the hunting season. So I just want to wish everyone good luck. Be safe, wear a safety harness, and go get the big one. All right, guys, take care.